Hi everybody, I'm Janet Bloomfield. Welcome back to Google Hangouts. This is the first in a series that I'm calling Get to Know Us. And what I'm going to do every Friday afternoon from now until the conference in Detroit is interview someone from the MRHM, some prominent member, either a member of A Voice for Men's staff, maybe one of the presenters at the Detroit conference, a regular contributor, other members of the movement. And the goal is for everyone to get to know a little bit about us and our journeys and how we came to be part of this movement. So my first guest, of course, is sort of the founder of the most prominent website for men and for men's issues, and that would be Mr. Paul Elam from A Voice for Men.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
All right, now the first question that you had for me was a question about my journey, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say I actually know very little about you and your journey. I know that you started out working in mental health services, but I really don't know very much more about you. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you came to realize that you weren't just seeing individuals with specific problems, that somehow you put together the realization that this was a systemic problem that was based on gender. I mean, there had to be a lot of things that happened for you to get to that point. And I'm really curious about your background and your experience and how you came to be where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, it started for me in the 80s, actually, during a time that I actually identified as a feminist. I was working in the mental health industry. At the time, I was the clinical director of a chemical dependency program at a hospital in Houston, and I became involved a lot as women's issues started coming to the forefront of consciousness in our society about the deficits that I perceived that we had in chemical dependency treatment as it related to women's issues. There are, despite the ramblings of some ideologues, people do have different issues as groups. There are issues that do affect women as a group. There's issues that affect men as a group. And at that time, the idea was coming of age that we were overlooking a lot of factors that might have impacted efficacy of treatment were related to women and how we dealt with them in the treatment setting. And so I took a very active role in establishing special tracks for women, in trying to get myself and my staff as up to date as possible on information that would help us serve female clients and address their issues during their time of treatment, especially as it related to problems with addiction and alcohol. At the same time this was going on, and it was ironically the root of why I was getting this information, we had an ideological takeover going on in our academic institutions, in our colleges and universities, that ideologues were going into, particularly into the liberal arts and into fields like mental health, and bringing feminist ideology, bringing women's issues to the forefront. And when I first saw it, I really thought that it was just the next logical step in a society that was looking for equity and looking for fairness and justice. But as time passed, even as I was involved with it myself, I noticed a lot of animosity, a lot of vitriol, a lot of the ideologues that were supposedly looking out for the interests of women actually expressing a message that was targeting men as their problem. And I witnessed in the mental health field the idea that we were treating addictions and maybe adding information about special populations in order to enhance our ability to help people to something entirely different. It became a blame game. Women came into treatment and were basically told by a lot of people that all of their problems were rooted in men, and which is, of course, is the complete opposite. The idea of good chemical dependency treatment is that we treat people accountability for their problems, that we acknowledge that they must take responsibility for their lives is if they're going to address a problem that involves their own choices, which addictions certainly do. And it got to be so hostile that it culminated in a point for me where at one point I watched a woman who we had contracted to come in and address a group of our men tell me before going into that session that she was being very handsomely paid to do, that what she loved more than anything else was taking men's macho bullshit and shoving it down their throats. And the way she looked at me was no different than the way she looked when she appeared to be envisioning how she would treat our male clients. This was an alarm, and I went to our administration and discussed it with them, and I found that the more I talked about it, the more resistance I got. The more that I found that people were not open to the idea that there might be something wrong with demonizing half the population and giving people who have accountability problems a scapegoat for their own actions that are self-destructive. And that's what really first caught my attention to the fact that there was something rotten in Denmark. And the more I investigated and the more I looked into it and the more actual feminist literature I read, and here's a little bit of self-revelation. I was like a lot of other people. I heard the idea of women's rights and women's equality, and I went on that with a banner and a crusade without ever really digging into their literature. But once I did, man, my eyes were really opened up that this was not a platform for helping women, really in any sense. It was a political power grab, and it was being accomplished by demonizing men. And we started seeing it come out in the pop literature and books like Women Who Love Too Much and Susan Forward's Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them. And all of this stuff being predicated on the idea that women love and men hate. And that was reflected all throughout the treatment field. I saw it in almost every clinician I worked with. And then I stumbled on, or I should say stumbled on, fate had me end up when Dr. Farrell's book, The Myth of Male Power, was first published. I don't know, I might have been one of the first few people to buy it. And I read that, and it finally put the pieces together for me of what was wrong. There really was something wrong going on in this culture where it addressed men's issues, and in particular where it did not address men's issues, and where it misaddressed women's issues and mischaracterized everything. And that woke me up. And this, of course, was really pre-internet days when things were not. We're very lucky now to have these platforms to discuss these issues, because I found in the early days that writing letters to editors, I did that feverishly. Maybe 1 of 10 of them would be published, that sort of thing. And so that was the start of my journey. It wasn't out of a bad divorce. It wasn't out of a mean mother or because some woman broke my heart. It was because I saw men coming into the treatment setting looking for help, and instead of getting help, they were getting the message that they were demons. And I was seeing women come into the treatment setting looking for help, and instead of getting the message of accountability that they desperately needed, because addictions can be terminal, they were getting the message, the exact wrong message, that none of this is your fault. And if you didn't have these issues with men, you wouldn't be an alcoholic. And that turned me around completely.
Okay, so did A Voice for Men as a website start with just you? How did the website get to where it is right now? Because it's pretty amazing. You're on the very front page of IMGR today talking about Chris Mackney, a case that desperately needs to be blown open. One of the most tragic instances of family law gone wrong. And IMGR as a website is linking directly to you. I mean, you are the source here. So how did you get from that awareness to this amazing tool, this amazing website?
I knew when I saw the internet first start developing, that there was a potential, because as I said, at this point I was already aware that the media was not going to pick up on any of these ideas. That and I will hand feminists one thing, and I caution people who call feminists stupid, because while certainly I've seen a lot of stupid things said by feminists, it seems a little bit silly to me to be calling a group of people stupid that have so successfully co-opted institutions like higher education, the media, the government, everything else. But at any rate, when I first saw the internet developing, I thought, there's the way, because this seems to be a platform that anybody can say what they want to say, a free-for-all, which I figured was the only place the internet was that this message would have a chance of getting out. So I started 15 years ago. I got the URL of voiceformen.com, and I got a little HTML for Dummies book, and went about building a website that got exactly no traffic, and started figuring out that the internet was a little bit more complicated than just being smart enough to figure out how to get a page up. And I realized at that point that the internet just wasn't developed enough. It wasn't user-friendly enough with technology, especially for technical morons like me to go in and do anything with it. So I went back to my other routine of trying to hammer at the mainstream and waited. And when I felt like the internet had reached a point, which I did in 2006, 2007, that it was going to be a viable tool that I could figure out how to use, I got my way into forums and started writing articles and opinion pieces about things. It got a little bit of attention. I eventually caught the attention of Mike LaSalle at Men's News Daily, who ultimately asked me to take over that as editor-in-chief and writing about men's issues. And I did that for a year. At this point, I knew it was going to go somewhere, and I also figured that that was the appropriate time in 2008 for me to go ahead and launch a blog of my own. And at the time, my goal was simply to have a successful blog. I wanted a higher traffic blog to bring attention and educate people about these issues, and maybe inspire a few other people to go right. I had no idea what it was going to become. I don't think I could have. But that's how it got started, was just my personal blog. And now today, of course, we have somewhere near 300 different people that have contributed to the site. We have many different regular contributors to the site. We're measuring our traffic in the millions and getting mainstream media attention, and all indications are that we are going to continue to grow. And before long, we're going to, I think, really get this message out there in a way that nobody's going to be able to ignore anymore.
What are your ultimate goals for ABFM and the MHRM in particular? Where would you like to see us end up ultimately?
I would like to see us end up in a culture that regards men as human beings. I would like to see the day that the idea that men are treated poorly in family courts doesn't raise eyebrows and is not a point of controversy, where people know the basic truth, because that's the beginning of change. I would like to see a culture where it becomes unpopular to knee-jerk label men's advocates as misogynist and whack jobs and extremists, because the general public knows that it's not true. Anybody that reads about our issues and reads about our advocacy with an open mind can see that the accusations, all the libelous claims that have been in the media, are simply not true, that this is a diverse organization of men and women who are out here working very hard and taking risks in order to bring underaddressed issues to the society's attention and looking for solutions. So in one way, success will be measured by how society ultimately reacts to the message. And in another way, I measure success is how effective we are at bringing fear to the right people. And I mean that quite literally. We have many, many corrupt prosecutors in this country and in Canada that go after men on flimsy, flimsy evidence that you would not use against them in any other crime except sexual assault. We have young men being drummed out of college, their educational careers being obliterated by star chambers that have been set up. We have our own government lying to people about the incidence and the frequency of things like rape and domestic violence and the nature of the victims and the perpetrators. We have so much disinformation and so much dishonesty, and I want people who are making their bread and butter to be afraid to do this, not because that there's any physical risk to them or any harm, but because their credibility will be obliterated in the minds of an informed public. And I believe that we can get there. Whether we're not trying to change the nature of human beings, although the nature of human beings does contribute to these problems, but we do want to change the nature of the way that society reacts to this, particularly in a public way.
Okay, you've mentioned a few really important issues. I'd like to speak as a woman who is in this movement and who cares about men because they're human, and what other reason do you need? But for women who are just on the verge of coming to understand that, yes, actually, there are some problems here. Are there any issues that you think are at the vanguard? I mean, sometimes it's simply not obvious that being human is good enough. Are there any specific issues that you think might resonate with women that they should particularly care about, that would be really good for us as women to be talking to other women about in an effort to get them to open their minds a little bit? Something that they might stop to consider in particular.
Absolutely. Two words: your sons. There is an abundance of issues that are facing our young boys that are as critical, believe it or not, as critical and as damaging as many of the issues that are facing men. We have young boys that are going into a predominantly female education system, starting with grade 1, where they are surrounded by messages of girls' empowerment and boys' privilege and entitlement, and how all this needs to change. This is an emotional marginalization, an emotional demonization of our boys from a very young age. I don't believe that most mothers want that for their children. I think they want their sons to go to schools and to learn how to cooperate with all people and to learn how to learn and to make the best of their lives. That's what I truly believe that most mothers want. I think there's a conflict sometimes because feminism has so well sold the idea that their agenda serves women that I think it blinds a lot of mothers to the facts that their sons are at risk here. Their sons are at risk not only from an education system that favors girls over them many times over, but they're also at risk from being abused with prescription medications. There's an industry built around medicating boys, and sometimes it is for hyperactivity disorders. Many times, though, frequently, boys are now ending up on these powerful psychotropic medications, literally amphetamines, with very, very serious consequences possibly for their brain chemistry and for their health in the future. And it's done to manage their natural masculine traits as boys. There is an abundance of literature that any mother, I mean, you don't have to listen to men's activists to go to Google and to research side effects of ADHD drugs and criticism of ADHD drugs. You don't have to listen to us at all. Go listen to the researchers that are talking about these things now. Go find out about the doctors that have taken millions of dollars from big pharmaceutical companies in order to come out and say that these drugs are safe, when there is a lot of evidence to indicate that they're not. Look, I would say to mothers, look at the future. Look at the percentage of young men in college right now and what's happened. How we've gone from a system that was at one point lopsided, where there were many more men in college than there were women, to a system that where the vector lines crossed and there was parity between men and women, to now we're projecting by 2017 that the population of young men in college could be less than 30%. Is this what you want for your son? Do you see this as a problem? When you look at your son and look at his future and you ask yourself, am I happy with a 3 in 10 chance that he will be in college, if that's the way he wants to go? Then, again, I said, you don't have to listen to me. You can go to the Department of Education and look at their statistics on boys in school and look at their problems with not only discipline, but with drug abuse, with truancy, with dropping out of school, and look at how many of this happens to fatherless boys. Look, I would encourage mothers to look at the deficit created in the lives of boys who lack positive male role models close in their lives. This is a devastating. Pick up a copy of Warren Farrell's Father and Child Reunion and read it. The research is there. These children are all suffering from these issues. So what do I say to women? The first thing I say is to mothers, is to think of your sons and ask yourself, and even ask yourself, as many mothers have asked too late, do I want to see my son's life destroyed in a family court to the point that he decides to take his own life? Because his options are to be in jail or to be in jail because he can't raise the money to pay the court off. I could go on for an hour about the motivations for women to become involved in activism on these issues. They never stop. On a personal level, even if we set mothers aside, one of the things that I would say to women is to ask yourself whether or not that you identify in your life as a powerless victim with no agency and no real mind of your own, no ability to succeed without a hand up, and ask if that defines you. And if it does not define you, I would ask you to go take a second look at feminism, and also look at the literature that we publish at places like avoiceformen.com, where many women are published there who are strong, brilliant, independent women who have decided that they don't want a group of ideologues making them out to be shrieking women standing on a chair screaming for somebody to kill the mouse. We could go on more and more, but there's a lot of reasons for women to become involved in this movement.
Okay, let's assume that women are going to be involved. Let's talk about how they can be an asset to the movement. And more importantly, what are some things that women do that actually aren't helping, that are hurting? And how can we avoid hurting a cause that we're trying to help?
The first thing that women can do, the most important thing, is to speak and to educate yourself about these issues, to read up on them, come to understand the nature of these problems that men and boys are facing, and then to talk about them. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to one of your friends on the phone, or if you're talking to 5 million people on the internet, or if you are, say you work as a journalist or an educator or a physician or anything else that women are doing in this modern culture. Talk to people about these issues and challenge them to rethink. Women do have a unique way, a unique ability innately. A lot of feminism's more corrupt messages have been accepted without challenge because they came from women. Because women, believe it or not, do have a natural way to command attention from men. And men do listen to what women have to say, despite a lot of the allegations that we see otherwise. When we look at even some of our activists like Karen Strawn, 50,000 plus YouTube subscribers. I don't have 50,000 YouTube subscribers. I'm not saying that there's not good reasons for that. Karen is an incredibly intelligent and articulate advocate for these issues. I would suggest the women to go to YouTube and look for Girl Writes What and hear what she has to say, and to read Janet Bloomfield's articles on her blog at JudgyBitch.com and see what she has to say. But the fact of the matter is that because Karen is a woman does mean that she is going to attract more of an audience. And it doesn't mean that she's not skilled or it's only because, but it helps. We have a culture that's wired to listen to women. Your voice as women truly matters a lot. And there is a lot of room for many more women to step up and to speak more about this. The things that women can do that are not so good and not so helpful. One, try to understand that the men's movement, again, there's a lot of allegations that we want women barefoot and pregnant and stuck in the kitchen and making sandwiches and speaking when spoken to. That's the allegation. It's a bunch of hooey that's been levied at us, mainly because there's a lot of ideologues that can't handle the idea that there's dissent to their ideas, so they try to demonize us in the process. But if you understand the issues, one thing that does not help us is to view things in a way that's not true. We don't want to turn back the times of hand. We want to move things forward. We don't want women stuck in the kitchen, to have no interest in it. And the reason for that is a selfish vested interest. The men's movement is not served by a message from women that we need to go back to men being up on their white horses and being the defenders of women. Understand our movement enough to know that this is not about. It's about giving men the same choices that women have, what we want to spend our lives doing, how we want to feel fulfilled. Whether or not it's the head of a household is a matter of choice for a man just as much as it is for a woman. So we are looking for a completion of what the feminist ideals have claimed to be for 50 years, but are not. And so getting that right from the beginning is very helpful. What's not helpful is when you see things in the men's movement also that you disagree with, trying to shame people is not helpful. You will find that most of our community is immune to it. We have seen through this game being told that if we support men's rights, it must mean we hate women. It's a ludicrous idea that we had bad relationships with our mothers, that we feel inadequate with women. I've heard a lot of these things. I beg to differ. That is certainly not the case with men's advocates. I would argue in many cases that is much more the case with male feminist advocates than it ever is with MRAs. But yeah, those are a couple of things they can do that don't help, which is to go into this thinking that it's about chivalry and that it's about turning the hands of time back to where women felt more protected. It's not. It's about moving forward with everybody having a sense of freedom in how they choose their own path in life.
Okay, let's talk about Detroit. You've got some amazing women coming to speak there. And I'm not suggesting that women are the only ones that we're going to listen to or be interested in, but there are some really Barbara Kays coming and Senator Ann Cools. And I'm curious, what specifically could women get out of coming to Detroit? What do women stand to learn and gain from coming and joining this movement so publicly?
I think they can gain primarily the same thing that many men will gain from this. We know from our emails, from our readership, you know, when you look at the gender division of the readership on A Voice for Men, it is slightly favoring males. Anyone is welcome to go to Alexa.com and find that out. You will find that there's near gender even divide on the readership of A Voice for Men. There are a lot of women who feel these things and see them and believe them, but there is also a lot of pressure on women. Women do get ostracized and attacked and put down for expressing these views just as much as men. It's usually in different ways, but they're also attacked, so a lot of women are hesitant to speak out. And I personally think, just like for the men, that coming to the conference in Detroit and watching Barbara Kay, national journalist, stand and talk about these issues with us, and Senator Ann Cools from Canada standing up and talking about these issues with us, and Dr. Tara Palmatier standing up and talking about men's relationship issues in a way that's never been said before, and the other women that will be at this conference speaking and addressing these issues, standing side by side with the men, is a good way for women to understand that there is a community out here for you to belong to and to have value in having your own ideas and not the ideas of ideologues who are telling you how to think. I think out of our colleges we produce a lot of pressure for women to conform to the idea that, oh, there's this horrific rape culture and women get paid 77 cents on the dollar, and a dozen other things that have been debunked over and over again. So we have a lot of pressure for women to maintain mythology in their lives. And this kind of conference will show you strong, independent, very educated women that are standing there and are flourishing, not buying into that ideology and having their own ideas. So I think that's a great emotional boost for all of us.
I agree, and I personally can't wait to be there. It's going to be fabulous. Now, I have another question for you. I wonder how you respond to critics who point out that having women in any kind of prominent leadership position in a men's movement can be a mistake for two different reasons. First of all, as this interview demonstrates, women are really good at co-opting the dialogue. I mean, I'm interviewing you about men's issues, and I've turned virtually every question into a question about women, about me, essentially. So we're very good at co-opting dialogues, and I wonder if you think that's a problem. Can you do that productively, or is it always destructive? Is it something that you watch for strategically and intervene in when necessary? And the second reason having women in leadership positions is that women, particularly when there are perceived differences in status, don't get along very well. So once you've got women in leadership roles in your organization, you've got bitch fights up and down the chain of command. Is this just an occupational hazard of working co-ed? Is it something that you have a plan for dealing with? Is this something you've experienced? Even more importantly, I mean, I'd like to think I'm above that kind of nonsense, but maybe not. I wasn't above co-opting the whole damn dialogue, so maybe I'm not. But I wonder how you respond to those critics who say, Paul, this is a men's movement, and while it's nice that women are out supporting us, we really need to maintain leadership in this. You don't see a lot of prominent male feminists. Feminists tend to be women. Men are allowed to join the party, but they are not leaders. Now, do you think that's a valid criticism?
I think it's a fantastic question, and I'm glad you asked it. I do have to say your beginning point I do take issue with. I don't think that you're interviewing me is co-opting a conversation. I think it's you're interviewing me. But that being said, I will move on to say that there are problems endemic with everybody in any movement. There are problems. We get men that hate women who want to join on and have a voice. We get men that stab each other in the back and lie about each other and undermine each other. I have never been, and if anybody thinks I'm going to skate her question, you're wrong. I'm going to get to the very core of it. We have primarily the problems of human beings. As long as we are human beings, we're going to have that. We're going to have people that will undermine, cause division. There will be people go off the reservation, so to speak, and decide that everybody that they've been working with is a bad person. There will be people struggling for power, and that does not know gender. And I can tell you that from personal experience very truly. However, that was really not addressing the real, very core of her question of when you bring women into a movement that addresses men's issues. Is there a tendency for some women to say, okay, now that I'm here, I'm going to start rearranging the furniture in this place? You betcha. It is there. Is there a tendency sometimes for cattiness in women that come into this movement? Oh, yes, there is. Again, I'm going to qualify. That's equaled by some guys I know that and have known in the past and no longer associate with, that, at least in my humble opinion, turned out to be absolute dicks. So you can call it catty or call it being a dick, give it some sort of gender reference if you want, or you can just look at the dysfunction and move on. But here's the issue. While there have been some issues with these things, with women coming into the movement, there certainly has been, and I'm not going to get into any names, but those of us those out there that follow us regularly will know what I'm referencing. There has been women that have come out and even taken on the agenda to start shaming men for going their own way and telling them they're losers, which we, you ask if there were plans for that? Yeah, I got a plan. Bye-bye. That's the plan where it comes to ABFM. But here's the other thing, and this is a matter of not only strategy, but it's a matter of not being a fucking hypocrite. This is a human rights agenda. This is not about the voice for men or a voice by men. It is a voice for men. It is an open forum and a movement for people. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're male or female. I don't care what color you are. I don't care who you call God, or if you don't have one. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care what sex you identify as. I don't care about anything, in particular when it comes to how we normally divide groups of people. I have found that organizations that stay focused on their principles and don't even engage much in this discussion are the ones that last, are the ones that remain focused, and are the ones that will weed out the idiots, whether they have a penis or a vagina. They'll get weeded out in due course anyway. So to answer your question directly, yeah, I think that those are valid points, and along with what I look for to be problems in some men and what I look for to be problems in other areas, I do keep an eye out for it. But my mission is on the front page of A Voice for Men in our mission statement. It says what A Voice for Men is about. And I can honestly say, and I'm not trying to blow my horn here, I'm saying I'm dumb and I keep it simple, that as long as I look at that mission statement and know that that's what we're doing, we're in good shape. Women also, and again, like I was talking about, when you ask me what I would have to say to women, we can't deny the efficacy of women's voices in this. It is very difficult for when we have somebody like you standing up, and by the way, Janet Bloomfield will be participating in a panel discussion on activism in Detroit, so I want y'all to look forward to that. And other women, God forbid, other women will be talking too, and they won't have to ask permission. But keep in mind that we have seen demonstrated over and over again that people like Camille Paglia, Christina Hoff Sommers, have garnered national attention. They're the ones that are published. It's a sick sign of a society that Warren Farrell has not been cited as any more recently than he has because he's male. But women can speak to these issues in places that men can't at times. If we just want to, we're never going to ignore that in order to maintain some sort of brain-dead purist mentality about penis only in this movement. Women are valuable, men are valuable, people are valuable. If we stick to that, we're just fine. And yes, when it pops up that someone wants to come in and hangs out for 10 minutes and starts nagging, they show that pretty quick, and we're able to show them the door without a problem. And that's the only strategy I have. I think the only one that I need.
So basically, everyone is welcome except assholes, and assholes of any stripe are not welcome. I think that's a good strategy. All right, I have one last question for you. Let's assume that there are people who would love to be in Detroit, who would love to speak out, who would love to throw their support behind this movement, but for various reasons, they can't do that. Especially, you know, sometimes putting up a link to ABFM on your Facebook page is just committing social suicide. That it's something that a lot of people can't do lightly, no matter how much they want to. If you can't talk and you're not in a position to speak and you're not in a position to come to the conference, what can people do to show their support without necessarily outing themselves? How can they support us quietly? What's the best way of doing that?
Can I answer that in two ways?
Sure.
Okay. Let me answer it first with a little bit of a philosophical perspective. And this does get into a touchy area, but that's sort of what I do for a living. And not to be bombastic, but here's the deal. My country, which I'm not a flag waver, I don't wrap myself in a flag, but I do appreciate American history. We were founded by a group of men that were willing to hang for their independence from another country, who literally signed their own death warrants. The fact that posting a link to ABFM that contains truthful information about people whose lives have been destroyed would cost you some friends on Facebook as a reason not to speak out. I'm sorry. It's just, I find that cowardly. And I do know that there are people who are not in a position whose consequences are more than just a few people unliking them on Facebook or defriending them. People have lost their jobs. There's professional consequences. There are things that I don't think any reasonable person would tell you, well, yeah, screw it, lose your job, whatever, or go to jail by doing something. I'm not here to send a message like that. But there are a few ways that anybody can help. One, you can donate to ABFM. You can help us. Let me tell you, if you can imagine the expenses of flying people from all over the world to come to this conference and putting them up in rooms in a hotel and taking care of the enormous other expenses to have one single conference, you'll see that we run things on a very tight ship. You could, if you could throw a few dollars into the tip jar, every little bit of it counts. That can help a lot. You can also help, and here's where the conference can come into helping. I was talking with Warren Farrell about this yesterday, as a matter of fact, and in this discussion that we're going to have on activism, we talked about a range of different skill sets that are important to the modern activist movement in any fashion. We need people who can speak, people who can write. We also need people with technical skills, with good computer skills. We are very fortunate to have David King at ABFM as a system administrator. He's brilliant, and he works tirelessly to help us. Not everybody has that. This movement needs more people like David King. We need people that are willing to go out and create anonymous accounts on Facebook if it protects their anonymity and post things, to start Facebook pages, to sign petitions, to distribute things, to start a blog. You don't have to give people your real name to have a blog. You don't have to make things public when you write congressmen or senators. The point is to keep talking, and whether you talk to anybody on a one-to-one personal basis, or whether you figure out a way to talk to 10 million at once and bring these issues, you are helping. We are not feminism. We're not so big and pervasive in society that our message is automatically carried everywhere like feminist messaging is. You can talk about this stuff. You can also take an interest in helping men in your lives when you see them affected. You see, the issues we're talking about are not fabricated. They're not made up. A lot of you out there right now that are going to watch this interview will know somebody in your life who's been hurt terribly by a family court, who have been hurt in some way in education, a child that's been alienated from their father by the mother. You guys know these people. Speaking to that, offering support to the victims is a way that you can help. You don't have to try to stand and put a target on your chest in order to help people that are affected by these problems. The bottom line is that if you educate yourself about these problems and you want to do anything, you will find a way to do it. And it's whether you do it anonymously or not, you will come up with a way. And that's about the best suggestion that I can give anybody, is just do something.
That's really nicely said, actually. Just do something. That should be our new slogan. Not just do it, just do something, for Christ's sakes. All right.
Other than come to A Voice for Men and tell us how we ought to be doing things.
Yeah, right. Well, this has been a very lovely chat. Now, is there anything that I haven't covered that you think people who maybe are getting to know you just for the first time should know about you?
I can reveal something about myself by going back to address just for one more moment a topic you brought up earlier. We do from time to time get comments. There was a comment on the interview that I did with you from somebody who identified as a man going his own way. And again, I support that philosophy tremendously, but this individual looked at apparently a bit of the interview and was like, what, another woman? What's going on here? What's going on is that this is not a boys' club. It is intending to help boys. But if you want to know anything about me personally, you can read 100 places on the internet that I hate women. What you'll never read on the internet anywhere except my website is why that could not possibly be true. What I want people to know is that men and boys are dying because of these problems, and that somebody needs to do something. But if you think that this is, and my response to that viewer, by the way, was, yeah, there's going to be a lot more women too, all kinds of them. And when people like the individual that I'm talking to now establish successful blogs that challenge these issues and make people think, I'm going to interview them too. I don't care what their color is. I don't care what their sex is. I just want to reiterate the message that this is a human rights movement, and that means that human beings are involved. And if you can't handle that, then you're one of the ones that we don't want at A Voice for Men.
Very nicely said. Well, this has been lovely, a lovely chat.
It has.
I have no idea who I'm interviewing next Friday.
Well, I don't know who you're going to be interviewing next Friday, but all I know is I'm going to be watching.
Excellent.
Well, I'll be in the comments trying not to be snarky.
Well, I hope everyone turns in next week for my mystery guest. Thank you to Mr. Paul Elam for your time and your openness, and it was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.